So, hello everyone. Welcome to the 2025 HFSP webinar on research grants. I'm with my colleagues Almut Kelber, the Director of Awards, and Liliana Gonçalves, who is our Science and Communications Officer. Welcome to all of you for joining us today. I'd like to just give you a quick overview, but before I do that, for all of you who are logged on, please use a minute after the session to complete the survey, because we would like to know from where you come and how many there are. That's just for us helpful information to improve maybe the timing and everything. Thank you so much. So today I'll give a short introduction to HFSP in general, an overview of our programs, and then my colleague Almut will take over and talk you through all the necessary steps and details of our research grant program. And as Liliana pointed out in the chat earlier, you can start asking questions right away in the chat, and we will make sure that everybody gets an answer. So let's get to it. HFSP arose out of a science diplomacy initiative in the late 1980s, which culminated in a declaration of the heads of state at this G7 Venice Economic Summit in 1987, where the heads of states, in the minutes of the meeting that you can see here, welcomed the initiative of the Human Frontier Science Program presented by the government of Japan, with the aim to promote through international cooperation basic research on biological functions. That's our core mission given to us at that meeting. And since HFSP has grown somewhat, we have new member countries joining over the last couple of years. So we're now 17 members, not countries, but members, because European Commission is not a country per se. So we have 16 countries plus the European Commission makes 17. HFSP started to award grants in 1990. We're headquartered in Strasbourg in France and currently run on an annual budget of $60 million. Now, what are we supposed to do with that? What is our mission? As pointed out in that single yellow sentence earlier, our mission is to support basic research in the life science, and we focus on innovative, really cutting-edge research that sort of extends into the unknown at the frontiers of life sciences. So we fund things that haven't been done before or have not promised a continuation of something. So it's really clearly focused on mechanisms in living systems. That is the broadest sense of defining biology in our context, or life science research, if you so want. And it's really important that you understand that we attach really importance in the decision-making to the scientific merit of the program, of the proposal, to the internationality and the interdisciplinarity. These items will come back in Almut's explanation on the research grant program in much more detail. So since starting with the program, HFSP has been actively supporting scientists in all these colored countries. The blue ones are our members, and the yellow ones are countries which are not members, but where we support or have supported researchers through HFSP research grants or fellows from these countries going out with HFSP postdoctoral fellowships. But as you can imagine, since the 1987, sort of the world has changed. Science is no longer sort of the privilege of the G7 countries. More countries are there who have excellent research environment and provide research institutions where life science research is carried out at the highest level. And so we were fortunate that in 2023, the G7 Science Ministers meeting in Sendai in Japan picked up again on HFSP, which I highlight here in yellow, and in their minutes of the Memorandum of Understanding mentioned again the value that HFSP brings to the member countries and to international collaboration in general. So what are we proposing? What are our programs? You see on the left here, there are in blue the award programs made up of the research grants, which is the topic of today's webinar. Then we have postdoctoral research fellowships. For that, we do a separate webinar early next year. If you are interested in that, please just follow our announcement to follow that. And we have an annual prize. It's a prize for scientific discovery, which is called the HFSP Nakasone Award. In addition, we have some of the support activities, outreach activities, which you see on the right. We have an annual meeting. We organize master classes in grant writing and are organizing frontier workshops that are topical workshops at the smaller scale. What is so unique about HFSP? And this I tried to summarize in a single slide in a couple of bullet points. We are really the only international multilateral program where a national funding consortium puts their money into a single pot with no direct say on who gets funded. It's really fully bottom-up, curiosity-driven. So you approach HFSP with an idea and not with preliminary data. We don't ask for that. It's 100% cross-disciplinary and international, and there are certain criteria in the grant program which will be explained in a minute. It's discovery research. We do have sort of leverage to support high-risk, high-gain proposals. We know that in a basic research proposal, not everything you want to do may work the way you had intended it, but that's a thing we are used to. That's part of discovery research, of basic research. Our program is very flexible, it's agile, and we have a very small administrative load on the sciences that we fund. It's very simple, very straightforward. And we really see ourselves in a Science Without Borders constellation in funding and supporting international collaboration in science and technology. How does it work? So our members give us a budget, which is then integrated into our overall organizational framework, which we use to manage the proposals and the awards. It's a central budget. There is no topical separation. And as I said, it's only merit-driven. The scientific community can then submit proposals to our office, to the different submission deadlines. As mentioned, no priority areas. It's fully idea-driven. And then we have independent, cross-disciplinary international review committees who evaluate, assess, and decide on the proposals. And then once a decision is taken, we will support you over 3 years with the financial support, but also with other means that I should show. So this is, in a nutshell, HFSP from a high level. If you're interested beyond this webinar to find out what kind of research do we support, I recommend that you go on our website and look up the HFSP Science Digest. We just published the volume 2025, which has a plethora of interesting summaries and articles about the research that HFSP-funded scientists have produced over the years. So this is a really a nice resource for you if you want to know more about the type of research that we support, because it really is very broad across the entire spectrum of the modern life sciences, including at the interface to robotics, to material science, including chemistry, physics, informaticians and mathematicians. So it's really a highly interdisciplinary research focus. And if you want to know more, you can always reach us under the yellow email addresses, and Almut will say more. As mentioned, we have the March 2026 webinar for the HFSP Fellowship. So prepare yourself if you're interested, and please do consider completing our survey at the end of the program. So with that, I leave it to my colleague Almut to continue us into the grant program.
Thank you, Guntram. And nice to see that many of you have connected to learn about our research grants. So I will continue and go directly into the matter of research grants. This is my daily business, so I hope I can explain to you what we expect to see, what we think can be successful, and also what the review committees would maybe say about certain types of applications. So as Guntram said, we fund research grants, which are coming in two shapes. All research grants are team grants for 2 to 4 scientists, each of them leading a lab or being an independent scientist with maybe could be a small lab. The PI of the team, so one person in the team who initiates the application, has to be sitting in a member country of HFSP, but all the other team members can be in any countries of the world. The grant project can deal with any basic topic which is at the frontiers of the life sciences. So anything from molecular biology, cell biology, organismic level of biology, ecology or ecosystem science. If it is a basic research question, there is a chance that we fund it. This research question that a team applies with should be a new question for all team members. And if a proposal makes it, then we support it for 3 years. The research grants program are for teams of scientists at any career stage, if they're independent scientists. And then the early career grants are reserved to teams where all team members are within 5 years of their first independent position and 10 years after their PhD. We often get questions about borderline cases. You can ask us via email, but generally, if we decide that a team is not eligible for an early career team, all we do is moving the proposal to the research grant program where the team has equally good chances to succeed. So what do we really support? So as Guntram said, it has to be basic research. And the idea is to really find a project that has a chance to bring new light in one of the important questions in life sciences. So a mechanistic question, how does a certain part of the life sciences, how does the organism work? How does something function? As I said, it can be anything from molecular to ecosystem and even cognition. And one of our core interests is really that teams should approach a research question by integrating ideas and concepts and tools from more than one field and include fields like material science, chemistry, maths, physics, psychology, anything which allows the team to answer a complex question more comprehensively than by just using the expertise of a life scientist. It should be original projects, innovative projects, which have a potential to move the frontiers of knowledge by a considerable amount and not just incremental. We definitely only fund international collaborations, and reviewers look very carefully at applications of 2 team members in neighboring countries. Then they ask for a better outcome than if it's really an intercontinental collaboration. And the background to this idea is that really still the research traditions and the ways of thinking differ between different research cultures. And we think that will help to make a project more competitive and more interesting and actually more successful. So, as Guntram said, we do fund high-risk research if it promises high gain and do not ask for preliminary data. But risk doesn't mean it may or it may not work. It means if it works, it's really great, but it's probably very hard to get it to work, and our first proposed method may not work, but we'll have an idea what to do if it doesn't. As it's a huge field, we do have large peer review committee that reviews all the HFSP grant proposals. It's 24 or 25 people in the same committee, and they're all discussing all applications, which tells you that they have to be very broadly minded. And it also tells you that all proposals in all fields will be treated the same way. There's not just one committee that's doing one thing and another committee that's doing something else. So in a nutshell, this is mainly what we fund in terms of science. And of course, there's a backside to it. There's a lot of research that HFSP does not support. And oh, it's not support. No, that's what we do support. Sorry. I deleted that slide. That's very stupid. So, okay. So I'll take you the opposite of what we do support, and that's what we don't support. If it's not really innovative and cutting edge, we do not support it. So if it's incremental, and also if it is a more applied project, HFSP does not support applied research. So any clinical, any technological advance that doesn't answer a biological question, HFSP does not aim to support that. And we do get a lot of such proposals, and they have a very low chance, even if it's very good science. Guntram has already told you to look at the Science Digest. There's another publication you find on the HFSP homepage on the 25 Research Grant awardees. That tells you what we've been funding starting this year. So that also gives you an idea of topics and proposals that have made it in the competition. And just to give you a little glimpse from some projects and the diversity of projects, there's projects in neuroscience that answer very broad questions like, how did the ability to count evolve? And there was a team, an international, intercontinental team that asked this question. We've been funding a project quite recently on aging using termite kings and queens versus termite workers to understand what makes one of them live very long and the others not. We've been funding a project which connects cancer and bone research. And maybe one of our wildest projects included an architect and studied how the ventilation in termite mounds would actually be organized and how these mounds are built to allow for good ventilation. And actually that has had already impact on how ventilation in buildings is planned. Here we are with doesn't support. I didn't know my order of slides. So as I said, clinical and pharmaceutical research, applied technology, directly applied agricultural, forestry, fishery production research, and then also projects that aim at just collecting data, projects which are completely descriptive, not asking for the mechanisms, purely observational studies, and some studies which have a lot of omics, but no functional questions fall in this category. And then we do not fund in for-profit environments, but collaborations are always possible. Now, as you have seen from the last slides, even though we only fund basic research, actually many projects still lead to applications simply because basic questions in the end very often can be applied if the solutions are useful and valid. If we fund a project, As I said, the principal applicant has to be an HFSP member country. If we fund, then there is an award of $300,000 for a team of 2, 400,000 for a team of 3, and $500,000 per year for a team of 4 members, and we pay for 3 years. The funding cannot be used for the PIs, so the applicant's own salary, but obviously for salaries of postdocs, PhD students, lab technicians, material, we're pretty open to anything that makes the project function. Normally we have about 700, 800 letters of intent, which is the first stage of applications. And then about 10% of them or a bit more are invited to submit full proposals a few months later. And then we pay between 30 and 40 awards. So the award chance aren't very high, but if you've made it to the stage of sending a full proposal, then the chances of success are actually quite good. Here's the timeline for the next cycle. We will open the application site in January, and then you have time until the 17th of March to start an application, which means you open the proposal form and you save it with whatever title of your project. And then when you've done that, you have another 9 days to submit with all the details. The reason that there are 2 deadlines is that it actually takes contributions from all team members to submit a full proposal. And if you only start it on the day of submission, it's usually not very efficient. So the first thing we do in the HFSP office in Strasbourg is checking the eligibility, and then a small committee evaluates whether a proposal is within the scope that I've explained, and then about 10% or sometimes more, which of the proposals which are purely clinical research or applied technological research or something completely different, or that are really not following the instructions and the scope of HFSP, they are removed from the competition. And then all the remaining proposals go through the full review by the committee. And they will identify about 250 letters of intent, which are the most promising ones, which suggest really excellent and really highly competitive, interesting research. These are discussed by a smaller committee of 10 to 12 experienced committee members. And then there will be about 80 to 100 teams that are invited to submit a full proposal. And everybody will get to know the result of this part of the first part of the review process by mid-July. And then there's time until mid-September for those teams who are invited to submit a full proposal to submit it. And these are then reviewed by up to 6 external experts, which are really in the field of the research. And actually invited teams are asked to suggest some of these. We always point out that teams need to suggest reviewers that do not have a conflict of interest and that feel competent in the field. We sometimes get very strange suggestions, so that's a good thing to think about. And then each of these proposals is reviewed by 3 review committee members and discussed at the review committee meeting, which happens at the end of January the year after, so that will be 27. And then those that have made it approved by the Board of Trustees of HFSP in March, and the teams will be notified. You'll find all the details of this on our homepage, and we'll update the homepage with the new review guidelines in a few weeks already. So, but there are no major changes, so you can look it up now as well. Yeah. And just a side note that there has to be an application opened by 17th March. That's not seen on the application guideline site, so it's important to read in the guidelines. So what makes a successful project? And what are the reviewers looking for? The reviewers look for really novel and daring ideas and innovative approaches. So they're looking for something that they haven't heard about, something that is really having the potential to answer a question that hasn't been attacked before, or answer a question that's maybe old, but attack it with completely new methods. It's really important to include scientists from outside the life sciences. That helps to make the proposal competitive. If a project requires some modeling, some mathematics, some computational methods, it's really useful to include a person who's good at that method, but may not have worked on this specific topic, but methods are broader than topics in that sense. And then it's always something that committee members look for, is that the team is working closely together and asking new questions. So a very common comment that we get from committee members is, oh, but this PI has been working on this topic for so many years already, and now they're just asking the next question that is on the list. That's not an HFSP project. So we always say start early because it takes time to develop a team and a team project. You need to talk, the team needs to be talking together. And if it's a team, as in HFSP project, that has not worked together before, it actually takes some time. Then, as we said, international, preferably intercontinental, interdisciplinary, and a new team that hasn't worked together. Because very often, if new people talk together, actually new ideas arise. People who've been discussing projects together very often come up with the same solutions as before, while if you haven't discussed before with somebody, you may actually find new intersections of your competences and your interests that are really novel. And really ask for a blue sky question, something that maybe initially you thought, that would be so great to do research on, but there's no chance we can do that. Take such a question and find the right collaborators and aim to answer it. And this goes along with the repeated point that if there are already preliminary results, then maybe you have already started, then it's usually not an HFSP project. So again, each team member has to bring a unique own approach to the research question. A team of 4 immunologists or 4 mouse brain researchers wouldn't be successful. Think of a question that's really, really novel, and make sure that each of the team members has an important role to the project. And that's why 2 to 4 members seem to be the right size of a team, because close collaboration with a large team is usually not as efficient. Clearly explain in the proposal how you will collaborate. So projects where each answers part of a question, but each team member can work on their own and independently in parallel. that's not seen as an HFSP project either. And if there's modeling or theory included, that needs to be explained in detail because there are competent members in the committee that will look at that. What you shouldn't do is basically the opposite. The next logical step in your research program, that's something you should apply for from another funder. Anyway, applications that you think are easily fundable in your national research funding agencies, they're usually not really HFSP projects. Obviously, collaborations within a single country are not eligible. And if there's the exceptional case of 2 members in one country, it needs to be very well argued for. But definitely a team of 2 members in one country and 2 members in another will not be funded by HFSP either. You cannot have a team with more than 1 member from the same institution. They will be ineligible. And it does not help to add a famous name and the person doesn't have a clear role in the team. In general, the reviewers are looking at the project more than at the track record of team members, because originality can easily come from early career researchers who do not have a long track record, but still have very good ideas. And then again, it's not helpful for an HFSP proposal if you start with the application of the results or the applied side, the translational side of the project that may be there, but really HFSP is asking you to put out a proposal that has a chance to answer a basic research question. If there is some application later on, that's all fine, but it's not really the topic of the HFSP proposal. So yeah, we read a lot of these letters of intent, and there are a few things that pop up very often which maybe you would want to avoid or maybe you would to take into account. So very often the title reads like understanding the something, revealing the something. Just remove the first 2 words and give us the title of the project. Of course you want to understand it, that's for sure. As the letter of intent is the most critical step in the process, actually, even though it's short, the abstract is just a few hundred words, and then there are small abstracts for each sub-project, you really have to be very convincing. Reviewers will not even read the second paragraph if your first paragraph isn't convincing, because they have to read a lot. So you have to win the reader in your very first sentence, or maybe in the first 2 sentences. You need to convince them that the research question is interesting and important. And just few things that sound counterintuitive. It's actually not complex, but simple language and style that can be very convincing. It's generalists that read these proposals in the first stage, so nobody will understand your acronyms because the reviewers will not be in your subfield of your research field. So try to avoid acronyms. Try to use language that can be understood easily and can convince that the question you're asking is important. If it's just on a sub-aspect of the functioning of one enzyme that you've been studying for a few years, maybe it's not HFSP. It helps to ask somebody who is outside your field to read and understand it and take their suggestions, because somebody from outside the field will see it with a bit more distance and can give you advice of how maybe a reviewer would read the proposal. And then don't spend space on saying that the project is interdisciplinary, international, and innovative. Just show it in the text. And do not tell us how fantastic the team is. The reviewers will see that. They will see it from the small number of publications that you have to list, but also from the way you explain the science. Okay, so again, this is the dates, and maybe that helps. I'll leave that for a moment, and then we can answer questions. Okay. So I will have a look at the question apps and answer them live. If I click on that, does that work? So the first question says, if scientists want to employ a PhD student, it's not only in the Netherlands that a PhD is 4 years, it's also in some other countries. And actually, we do fund research for 3 years. So we pay 3 years in a row, starting in the month that the team aims to start, the team tells us. But the team is allowed to use the funds for 4 years. So if you employ a PhD student, you should actually start employing them right at the beginning of the grant period. The teams will know that they have been awarded end of March, and the teams can start the grant anytime between May and December. So that allows teams who need to employ somebody on a 4-year fellowship or position to employ that person on the right date. I think that's that answer. And the budget for a 2-member team is going to be 300,000 per year, and the team can decide exactly how to divide it. Sometimes one team member needs to buy equipment in the first year, so gets more funds in the first year, and then this other team member gets more in the second year. But that's among the team members, so it's $300,000 US. There's a question about the innovation requirement across disciplines. For example, if a consortium includes a chemist, would it be acceptable for their contributions to involve a well-established material probe, as long as its use in combination with the other discipline creates a generally novel biological approach? Yes, we're really looking at the novelty for the biological field and the life sciences, and the same applies for computational methods that may have been used in physics, but may be completely new to be used in a biological field. That's fine, unless it's a really standard method that everybody's already using in biology, then of course it's not really there's a question about tuition fees, and HFSP does not fund tuition fees. HFSP funds the salary of PhD students, postdocs, other students, lab assistants, PhD student fellowship, but not the educational part of it. So HFSP does not fund the education of the student, which sounds strange because, of course, doing the science belongs to the education, but tuition fees are not funded. We think that's the job of the university or somebody else. The definition of a new team collaboration. There are occasions when previous joint publications of an applying team are seen as okay. For instance, if a team or two members of a team or all members have been jointly authoring a multi-author paper, one of those consortium papers, without having had a close collaboration. Review papers can also be seen a little more relaxed. And then sometimes teams that have had one or two papers together like 20 years ago, that's also fine. So this is about what we think about it. We ask teams to list all joint publications in the proposal, and then both us in the secretariat and the review committee members look at it and decide case by case whether it's seen as an ongoing collaboration or not. So multiple institution submissions from a lead institution, is that seen as negative? And the point is, we don't get applications from institutions, we get applications from scientists, and each scientist is seen as an individual applicant. Each individual applicant can only be part of one application each cycle. And that's both for early career and research grants program, but it's also as a PI and as a co-PI in the team. So if you are applying as a co-PI, you can only be part of one grant, even as a co-PI. You can't be a part of two different applications. It is clear that we do get multiple submissions from researchers from the same institution. We do not look at that. We really take each researcher as an individual applicant. Guntram has mentioned to look at the website. Yes. There is a site where if you go to the HFSP website, it says awards, and you can actually look by country, not for the recent awards, for the 25 awards, but for the older awards, you can look by country and see. Actually, it doesn't really matter from where awards were awarded, but it may help if you want to find somebody in your university whom you can ask, can you share your letter of intent that you sent when you got awarded? That usually helps to ask former awardees, what did you look for? What did you think about? How did you plan it? That actually helps. University labs qualify. Especially, so a university lab is something which can have very many definitions. So applicants are not institutions, as I said, but applicants aren't labs either. Applicants are scientists who have a research group or a lab, and there are so many different versions of labs that it's very difficult to answer this question. But for instance, in some countries such as Germany, but also in Japan, there are very often large labs which are headed by one full professor, but then there may be subgroups individually headed by either an assistant professor or somebody with another title, but each of which has their own small research group. Such people can apply for an HFSP grant, but we may ask the head of department or the lab leader to confirm that if awarded, this applicant actually can both decide about their research program individually, independently, and also about the budget. So we do not want to fund somebody who works in somebody else's lab and then the big boss is actually handling the funds. That's something we do not fund. But if somebody is in one of those positions where they are not completely sure, please send us an email and we help you to find out whether you are eligible or not. So how does HFSP balance consolidated track record in own field of research and new blue sky ideas? And that's a very good question. It's sort of a bit of a balance. Definitely what we ask for in the proposal is to list 10, up to 10 publications for each of the team members. And this is meant to help the reviewers decide whether the researcher actually has the expertise to work on these risky ideas. Obviously, either you use methods to answer a risky blue sky idea that you have already developed or that you are able to develop. And it should be clear from your track record that you will be able to develop it technically. Say, a person who's never ever touched cryo-EM, but now proposes a project which mainly uses cryo-EM for something really, really important, very difficult and very risky. In that situation, the reviewers would probably want to see that the person has done something related to it, or that the person has access to a cryo-EM lab where they can get help with the more technical parts. But the person should be clearly giving the information needed to evaluate their ability in that kind of field or technique. Or another team member should be able to do this. So team members can be specifically for specific questions. So you could have a project that uses cryo-EM, and the person who's doing cryo-EM in the project has done it, but on completely different questions. That would be okay. Can a project include a part that involves field-based research? Yes, it's a very simple answer. Yes, it does. And very often, if field work is required and field work is to be done in a different country, it may be worth the effort to find a qualified scientist from that country, if it's a major part of the project, to include and really include in the proposal a scientist from the area where you want to do the research, and not just a person who will get you the permits for the work, but really a person who can make a serious scientific contribution to the project. I've been collaborating personally myself with people in various countries, including Brazil and India, and I do know that science in those countries is seen very favorably if scientists from the country are involved. And very often these countries do have very good scientists if you go and look for them. Is there a template to follow for the LOI? Yes, there is. And if you look at our homepage, there is a how to write a letter of intent section, which gives you the type of text that will be required in the LOI. So you can look it up there. Are early career awards judged separately, or do they have a separate allocation? So it's a yes to the first question and a no to the second. So they are all evaluated by the same committee in a way. It's not very separately, but they are discussed in a separate session. And reviewers are even instructed very clearly to take career stage into account even for the research grants program. We do see a lot of almost early career projects in the program grants where somebody's been having their lab for 6 years or their PhD for 11, but the other members are very young. So reviewers do take this into account. There's no separate allocation. It's each year decided will be a ranked list of the program grants and a ranked list of the early career grants. And then there is a decision taken where the cut will be in both lists. So that's a decision that's taken each year. The success rates are very similar in both project categories. Sometimes one is higher, sometimes the other. I think no, I didn't. Yes, I did. Okay, thank you for that. Is it typical to include in the budget funds for the exchange of graduate students and or postdocs? So there's no budget in this proposal because the grants come as a lump sum, and we do hope that researchers, when they get awarded, know how to use the money most wisely. I do know that some granting agencies demand that researchers decide already at application state which computer they will buy, and then 2 years later when they buy it, that computer will not be the best computer to buy. So no, HFSP doesn't ask for a budget. And yes, student exchange, postdoc exchange, lab visits, that's all part of HFSP grants and is very favorably seen in the project because that's part of how projects of this type work. You have a PhD student in one of the team members' labs and maybe a postdoc in the other, and they exchange heavily and they teach each other the methods needed. They exchange material and so on. So yes. A postdoc. Yes, a postdoc for an early career grant does have to have a position. So we cannot accept applications from somebody who is a postdoc. And they need to have the position started the latest at the full proposal stage. So we sometimes get proposals from people, from teams that include a team member who says, I will start my position at that university in June. And then we ask for a paper that confirms that. That's fine. But a postdoc cannot run an HFSP lab. HFSP has postdoctoral fellowships, and those are for postdocs, but grants are for PIs that have a position at a university. Can we receive these slides? I think the talk will be, the presentation will be online because it's been recorded. And yes, you can see these as much as you wish. What is the distinction between the early career program and the research grant program? The only real difference is that in the early career program, the researchers are early career. And the slight difference that results from that is that we assume that it's a little bit more difficult if one is early career to start a project that is very far from the ongoing research. And it's also a little bit more difficult to start a project which is really highly interdisciplinary. So when the committee discusses projects from the early career program, they are a little more relaxed with these two criteria. But they are that as well if they notice that a team is almost early career, but it's discussed in the program grants. So in the discussions I hear repeatedly that this is a very early career team, although it's a program, I know we are discussing a program grant, but it's actually an early career team, and I think they should be given benefit for that. So it's not very much of a difference. It's not like, for instance, ERC grants, where I think an early career researcher would have no chance whatsoever in one of the senior grant schemes. How do you ensure AI is not used to prepare proposals? Well, that's a very interesting question. I tell you, we've looked at that. And a year ago, I would have told you that maybe there are actually programs that can more or less tell you whether something is AI written or written by a person. And a year ago, I would have told you we would use programs that are not exposing the text that we test to be public and check. But this year, I'm telling you that we've looked at it, and these programs that propose to decide whether something's AI written or not, these programs cannot do it any longer. And so we do not ensure that AI is not used to prepare proposals. We do ask teams to let us know whether they've used AI, and we do instruct you as applicants not to use it to create ideas, but maybe if you use it to improve language or something, that's up to you. We just want to know. It's not, as far as we know, having an direct influence on the decision, but it's the project idea that counts. And if you want to do an experiment, that's up to you. Yes, so we can't ensure that any longer, and I don't think anybody can if they are really honest. So that's where we are at this time. Is it better that there's no joint proposals to list? I'm not really sure what that means. Whoever wrote Catherine Cotter, can you explain that question a little better? Because if you have other joint proposals, we asked you to list them. And yeah, please, I think I need more details for that question. To clarify mechanisms of the human sense, we are thinking to do some measurement in young children. Is this theme fit to the HFSP? We do fund research that is on human subjects. If it answers a basic question in the life sciences, yes. You need to, of course, have permits to do experiments on human subjects. I'm sure you're aware of that. But generally, human senses, like all animal senses, are in scope of HFSP, and so that's all fine. If I'm an academic transition from one institution to a new one, can I move the HFSP grant? That's a very good question. Yes, you can. You can move it at any stage of your grant, and we support that. And if you've already got payments to one institution and then you move after 1 or 2 years, we help you doing this in a smooth way, but we ask the money to be moved from one institution to the next and not via HFSP, because the only ones who would win from that would be the banks. So yes, you can. You can also move during the application process, but if team members move such that after the move, all of them are in the same country, then the application is no longer eligible. So check that carefully. Are there any banned countries for co-PIs? Oh, that's a very difficult because it is a political question. There's a specific country to which the European Commission is very hesitant to pay any funds. I'm not naming that. And I do know that there are maybe universities in some countries that are hesitant to sign the agreement for a team with members in certain countries. So that's actually something that's not coming from HFSP, but if you're in a country that is critical with respect to research security and collaborations with some other countries, then it is wise to check your team composition with your research institution upfront. So we do not see the situation that a team is fantastic and awarded, and then the institution, your institution, doesn't want to sign the agreement, because the agreements are made between HFSP and all institutions in all the team members' countries. And so if a certain country, whatever, appears and your institution doesn't want to sign, then we can't fund the grant. But yes, HFSP as such is aiming to be unpolitical and not exclude any country. Can researchers from the same multi-center institution but different sub-centers apply together? Now, I'm not really sure what a multi-center institution is, but if you're at, say, one of those universities which have a dependance in another country, that is not possible to apply together. If your university has another campus somewhere, whatever, for the life sciences and for the clinical work, that is seen as one university. If you have a specific question, it's probably good to send us a mail. But I remember a proposal from 3 members, one in a university and the second in another university, and the third was in a different country, and the third was in the university hospital of one of these 2 institutions. We said, no, university hospitals mean that you're a professor at the medical faculty of this institution, which that person was, and is not eligible. But if you have a question, just ask us. Then how many researchers can be included in the same team from one country? Preferably only one. And at maximum, maybe a second. And if a second team member from the same country is included, the second team member has to be from a different institution. And the reviewers want to really see a good reason why this person has to be from the same country. There are specialists in some areas where there's only one person who can do the job. That's all fine. But if you need an electron microscopist in the general life sciences and you tell the reviewers that the person has to be in your country, they may not be convinced. Also, if the person doesn't really add a new interdisciplinary component, but is a second immunologist in a team which already has an immunologist or whatever, brain scientist. So it happens that applications with 2 members, 2 out of 3 or 4 in one country are successful, but it's rare. And definitely, if it's more than 2, definitely there's no way it's successful. A permanent position at a university and presently doing a postdoc at another university until March. That's a very interesting situation. we would want March 27. I mean, if you're a postdoc when you're applying, yeah, send us an email. We need to know more details about that. But usually, if you're a postdoc when you're applying, you're not eligible. Maybe just apply the year after, when you've really set up your lab, because a permanent position in some countries does not necessarily mean that you are running a research group. So a pre-postdoc position is usually not the permanent position that defines an independent researcher. But if you have a specific situation and these happen, then just let us know and send us a mail and ask. Okay. Is pilot data desirable for ERC applications? I think we've said that preliminary data are not really desirable. But sometimes if you propose a project that's really highly risky and where the very first step that needs to be done to make the entire project possible, if that first step, this first experiment is already very risky, and it's very likely that it doesn't work, and there's no good explanation what you do if it doesn't work, that would mean the project falls into pieces after 2 months or half a year. That's something that HFSP tries to avoid. So in that situation, maybe pilot data as a proof of concept will be helpful. But otherwise, it doesn't really make a difference between ERC, between early career or program grants. And ERC usually actually stands for ECR, early career research. Okay, yeah, anyway, yeah. So usually maybe a proof of concept, if it's really a risky project, will help, but normally it's okay to start a completely new project. Okay. Catherine Cotta, thank you. You mentioned that the population to list joint proposals, but then it shows collaborations that may be misunderstood possibly as an achievement. Why would one list joint projects? Why would one list joint projects? Because if you tell us that you won't, then we may find them anyway. You dozens of joint papers with one of the team members. And I honestly think that reviewers are not very happy if they find that team members have published together but didn't list these papers. So why would you list joint publications? Because you are expected to be honest, that's all. And there are very simple methods, I'm not sure you're aware of that, but there are very simple methods to check whether two people have published together. And you don't need to be a top scientist to use them. And we are actually able to use them. And that's why you would want to list them. And in that field where we ask you to list joint publications, we give you space in which you can explain in a sentence or two why you think that shouldn't be considered. There are cases like, there's this paper which has 2 team members as co-authors, but actually it was a collaboration of our postdoc supervisors at the time. And actually the 2 of us never really closely collaborated, but each of us provided a little bit of data or something. And then we would say, okay, that is not a problem. So that's the reason. Anonymous attendee. Is there any allowance for time extension of criteria 10 years? Yes. So, not for COVID. Yeah, we decided that COVID was hitting everybody on this planet, I know some were hit harder than others, but actually most people were hit quite hard. And we did decide in the end not to change the conditions. But we do allow extensions for parental leave, long periods of illness, long periods of taking care of close relatives. And you have to enter such periods in the CV with start month and end month. So that's taking into consideration. Otherwise, it's not really a problem because almost early career researchers are successful in program grant competition as well. A postdoc position offer in another institution expected to start in September 26th. Yet I'm waiting for my thesis defense. Now we had postdoc fellowships. Later in summer 26. Yes, I think you can apply with that, but that should be fine. Yes. But you could send a mail to fellow@HFSP and double check if you want to be really sure. Do you have guidelines for the level of commitment that PIs are expected to put into their work on a project? Oh, obviously we want full commitment. No, it's not like some funders actually ask the percentage of commitment that PIs put into a project, right? HFSP doesn't do that. And one of the reasons is that it's something that, how would we know it's going to happen? How would we ever control percentage of commitment? And how do we know that a person isn't 500% committed? So honestly, we don't see that as a meaningful component of an HFSP grant proposal, and so we don't enter it as a criterion. If the postdoc applicant in the team, there's no postdoc applicant in the team. So if you're a postdoc, you cannot really apply for an HFSP grant unless you have a position long before the award begins. And that means actually at the point when full proposal, actually you have to have a position when you apply usually. That gives you 5 years to apply for early career grants. Isn't that great? So a postdoc is not eligible as a team member. And definitely the PI cannot host another team member as a postdoc. It's not a grant for a PI to host postdocs. These grants are between team members that have not worked together. So if one of them is the postdoc of the other, that doesn't work for an HFSP team. Okay, hello to Argentina. Romina Barroso. You cannot act as a PI of the proposal, but you will build a team, and then you will have to have a team member from a member country, and that team member would have to take the PI role. That's simply because the HFSP member countries want to keep some control over the research grant program. And so that's where the PI, who is the contact point to HFSP usually, but otherwise team members are really seen as on the same level scientifically. That's why we have this rule. But if you put together your team and there is a member somewhere else, that's fine. We have actually funded quite a number of teams with members in Argentina. So you should actually find Argentinians on that page, on that HFSP homepage, and you can look them up, and maybe you know someone of them and can ask them about advice. Okay, Catherine Cotter. How to distinguish between misconstruing the extent of the collaboration? Well, it's just basically you explain how you've been or not been collaborating. Those people who do evaluate these proposals are very experienced, and they do know how collaborations work. And if you explain it in a sentence or two, they will interpret it in the best possible way. So, but send us a mail if you have specific questions, and we'll try to let you know what we think about it and what the committee will most likely do. Because there are these cases, we've got a lot of cases where there's one or two publications between team members, and the review committee says, yeah, but that is not a problem. And then there are other cases where they have a recent publication together where the reviewers say, well, this team is already on this project, so it's not a new collaboration. It's usually quite easy to see. Are there online webinars targeting the fellowship applications? Yes, there will be in March. And if you watch our homepage or sign up for our newsletter, you will get to know it first of the mill as soon as we've set a date, but we haven't yet. The definition of a team applies at the research group level rather than to an individual researcher. This research group can comprise multiple investigators? No. So the definition of, so we are aware that team can be used in very different ways. So an HFSP team is comprised of individual team members, and each team member is an individual researcher. But these individual researchers would be running a research group. So that's the type of researchers that have at least the first PhD student, or have a large research group or a small research group. But there are these very large research groups with 5 PIs, each of which has their own grants and postdocs. Such groups with several PIs and really HFSP team members, because it's a single person who is actually listed as a team member of the grant. And we sometimes, but rarely, see applications where someone says, well, I'm Mark something, and then in the project say Mark and Elisa will do this. And then I'm looking up Elisa, and Elisa is actually his colleague, and we'll say no. Either it's Mark doing it with his postdocs and PhD students, which are not applicants, but members of the PIs, the team, or it is Elisa doing the project, but it's not two people in the same university acting as a team member. And you can't share team positions. So you can't say, well, there's an application between Mark and Elisa as one team member. No, it has to be decided whether Mark is running the project or Elisa from that university. If you get what I mean. Otherwise, just ask again. Okay. Svenja, now yes, so you can employ, Svenja Tidau, you can employ postdocs from the HFSP grant, and you can pay PhD students, and you can pay master students and lab assistants. You can buy microscopes. You cannot buy your desk or your computer, and you cannot other sort of standard lab and desk material, we assume that the university pays for the standards. You can't pay a secretary, but yes, you can pay postdocs. Good. Catherine, is indirect costs covered? That's a very good question. HFSP allows 10% of the total grant sum to be spent on indirect costs. That's far less than most universities take, but the HFSPO actually gets funds to fund projects and not to fund university infrastructure as such. And so indirect costs only to that very low percentage. Even though universities do not like it, we have seen no grant that was not taken up because of that. So universities are able to bend their rules for an HFSP grant. If I fail to receive the research grant 1 year, can I try again the year after? Yes, you can. There are no rules that ban applicants. It's far too complicated for a team grant to ban applicants. We have usually tried to send feedback on the proposals. We do definitely send feedback to all proposals that have been submitted as full proposals. Some of them apply again, some of them make it, some don't. In the recent years, we've tried to also send feedback to those who've been rejected at the letter of intent stage, but this particular year we haven't, because we got so many applications that I simply couldn't do it. And you may have seen Guntram's slide, which said that there are 17 people working at HFSP. I'm one of them. If there's feedback written compiled from the comments from the reviewers that we promised the reviewers not to share directly, then it's me, and 1,200 was just too much. But yes, you can apply again.
Okay, I think this was the last question. We close it here a bit later than initially previewed. Thank you for participating in this webinar. Thank you, Almut, for this presentation and all these detailed answers. The video will be available soon on our YouTube channel if you want to rewatch it and focus on some slides. And please take 2 minutes after this session. A pop-up will show in your screen to give us some feedback about this webinar. So thank you and have a great day.